Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. Really excited this week to start a new series on the podcast. And this will be an MBA career series where we bring on people who have worked in very popular industries for MBA applicants, whether that's management consulting, investment banking, venture capital, tech, etc. And we get guests on the show to really break down what it's like to work in these industries, how these industries recruit MBA students. And so I hope this also gives you kind of an inside look, right, into what it takes. Because, of course, you're applying to business school to land these types of jobs. So I think this is an important part of the process, an important education for you as well. And I want to give a hat tip to Matthias, who actually inspired this series, because even though Matthias just started at London Business School, he sent me a note saying, he still listens to the podcast and he'd love to hear these types of interviews. So thank you, Matthias, for the inspiration. And the guest for this week's show is Sandra, who I've known for a very long time. She's a dear friend. And after graduating from Northwestern Kellogg, she worked for McKinsey for 5 years. So I think she has just a ton of great advice to share. I also want to give one disclaimer that these are Sandra's personal views and don't represent McKinsey. So just keep that in mind. And also, I want to thank our sponsor. Ranked among the top public universities in the U.S., The Ohio State University Fisher College of Business provides an outstanding MBA experience tailored to your interests and leadership development. Whether you're switching careers, enhancing a career, or starting a business, an MBA from Fisher provides tomorrow's leaders with the knowledge and skills to succeed today. Visit fisher.osu.edu to learn more about Fisher's personalized MBA program and competitive scholarship opportunities. So yes, thank you, Ohio State Fisher, for sponsoring this episode. And also, one last note, at Touch MBA, we offer free school selection help. Go check that out. That's what we do. And here we go. Let's just jump straight into the episode. I'm thrilled to have our next guest on the show, a longtime friend who I've known for many, many years, Sandra. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us on an early Sunday morning from New York. Really appreciate it.
Happy. You're missing a beautiful day in New York, actually.
Oh, man. Don't tell me that. But so Sandra, could you just give our audience a little bit of background on what you were doing before business school, where you went to school, and what you're doing now?
Sure. So I took a bit of a long and winding path, into consulting. But I started in government in Singapore and then did that for 4 to 5 years. Then I joined a small consulting firm at the time called Promontory. We were starting the Singapore office and it was a DC based firm. Did that for a couple of years, but we were very focused in risk consulting. And then 2008 came and, it was a tough time for everyone. And I thought this is probably the best time to go to school. So that was when I started applying. Went to business school in 2009 to Kellogg at Northwestern University, which was a fantastic, fantastic experience. It was, if I had known what I knew school could be, I would have gone back and relived my college days, but it was that good. I had an amazing time. And then after 2 years at Kellogg, graduated, came to New York, joined McKinsey, doing strategy consulting, did that for 4.5 years. And then since then, jumped from private equity into a bank where I currently am.
Yes.
So that's kind of my path in a nutshell. So ask away.
Wow. And so did you apply to business school with the goal of working in management consulting?
That's a great question. I don't think I really knew. For me, when I was already in consulting, I enjoyed my job. We were doing fun work, but it was really just solving for a slowdown in the general environment, and I didn't want to waste time. And I thought, from a personal perspective, it was the right time to take a break, reset, and maybe think about how to get into the US job market. I was sitting in Singapore at the time, right?
Yes.
And so, of course, doing a US-based MBA program is a great way to sort of do that jump. And I was not married to being in consulting, but mentally I knew that, consulting was a path that I would enjoy. It would be one that recruited in a very structured way, and it would have a lot of office options for me. I could, from Singapore, try to say, could I go to an office in London? Could I go to an office in New York? So I think all of those things the confluence of that was I would most likely decide to recruit for consulting when the time came.
Yes. And so speaking of that structured recruiting, did you do a summer internship with McKinsey as well?
Right. So the process, I did. And the process is that, and I think this was my biggest learning getting to business school. A lot of people think that business school is an opportunity for them to find themselves and figure out what career they want. But I would strongly encourage that you do a lot of that thinking up front, or at least get a set of questions or narrow stuff down. Because, for us, let's say the school year starts the beginning of September. By late October, people are interviewing for first-year internships. So there's really not much time to go learn. And if you try to spread yourself too thin in the early days where, think about it, you're getting back into a school structure, you're making a lot of new friends, you're aggressively partying, there just isn't any time. And so I think that the people who came in thinking, I don't know what I want to do, and spent the first 2 months sort of spreading themselves out across a lot of informational sessions and talking to a lot of people, were very, very tired. And so, I think having a sense of what you want to do is helpful. Then when you come in and maybe six or 8 weeks after the school year starts, you're deep in the recruiting process, you can really make the most of your time. So for me, I knew that I just wasn't prepared to take on too much more in terms of investigation. I decided to recruit for consulting. And in October of my first year, did the whole rounds, probably dropped my resume at 6 to 8 places. Ended up going back to Singapore for my internship at the end of the first year at McKinsey.
Yes. And is it absolutely necessary, like if you wanted to land a job at those big name consulting firms post-graduation, do you have to do a summer internship with them? Is that the only path to landing those associate role positions?
No, not at all. I would put it this way. I think you have an edge if you have an internship in a all, or maybe it's a little strong to say all or nothing, but hear me out. So let's say you intern at a consulting firm and you get an offer at the end of your first year internship. In the second year, you go into an internship. It'll be much easier in the second year, you go into recruiting. It'll be much easier to say, I had an internship from firm A, but I prefer firm B, but A gave me an offer, so I can do the job. Now I'm just trying to upgrade. Now, if you had that experience and tried to upgrade a firm, but didn't get an offer from your first firm, that's tough, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is it becomes a data point that is useful if it's positive and very detrimental if it's negative.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure then. Yeah?
It is a little bit, and I think it probably applies to a lot of different industries, right? Like I rely on a competitor firm, for example, to do my recruiting and to do my proxy data gathering because you interned at that firm. If they didn't even think you deserved an offer, then the job is not so vastly different that I would give you an offer. I think that's a hard sell. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you thought that you might want to do consulting but weren't quite ready for the process, then it might be good to then take the extra time from the first year to do a lot of research and to do a lot of practice and then target it for full time. Now, the problem with that sort of methodology is that when it comes to second year recruiting, the actual slots available for additional people has been greatly reduced, right? We take people in from the internship program. So if there were 10 places available for the entering class, for your entering full-time class, 10 places have already been given to interns. We gave summer associates, we gave a position to. So you are fighting for a reduced number of spots. But again, like for internship, because we care so much about making sure our summer associates have a great experience and feel really successful, I would say the bar is, very, very high for the summer. And for the full-time class, maybe there's more room to take a little bit more of a chance in terms of people who may have a slightly different fit. And you think this person's really smart and cool, may not really love our firm, but maybe we'll give it a shot, We try not to take those chances with the summer recruiting.
Right. Got it. That makes sense. And then do you have a choice in terms of like where you'd be in the firm? And I've read about there's specialists versus generalists and the different functional practices, of course.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what you want to do and what you think you bring to the table. And of course, depends on the firm. So at a place like McKinsey, we do have a lot of functional practices. We do have specific recruiting to functional areas. And you can choose to do that. My thought around this is, I don't know that it necessarily gives anyone an edge to recruit directly for a function or a specific industry type. I'll give you an example. Let's say you've spent your career in marketing and you know that you only want to do marketing here on out, but you just don't want to do it for a company or an agency. You want to do it at a consulting level. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to McKinsey's marketing practice and saying, I love marketing. This is my bread and butter. This is what I'm experienced in. I'd like to recruit into the marketing practice and do only marketing work. That's very normal and it makes total sense. It's a story everyone understands. It wouldn't make sense, of course, if you were in tech before and said, well, I'm going to try to recruit into the marketing practice because I like to do marketing. I think that's a much harder sell, for one. And then the inverse is also true too, which is if you've been always doing marketing but not sure that you want to do it for the rest of your consulting career, does it make sense for you to go to the marketing practice and say, I really only want to do marketing work? It may or may not give you a leg up because the recruiting process is, 95% the same, with 5% difference being maybe in the kind of, case interview that you get. But the bar is the same. The bar is not higher or lower just because you went to a functional practice. So I think it's better to solve for a long-term structure where you can be happy and where you're doing the kind of work that you want to do. That would be my McKinsey experience. I think for other firms, I think Accenture probably does this as well, where they do have specific practice recruitment. But I believe with Accenture, it is pretty firm that they have X number of slots and X number of offices for specific practices. And so you do recruit into doing a certain kind of work and you may get less choice around it. Like no one may really recruit into a generalist practice, so to speak, is my understanding. I could be wrong. Right.
And so when you say like 95% of the recruiting process is similar, can you break that down for us just one more time?
McKinsey, I think you do usually a total of 4 or 5 cases. I'm almost certain. I mean, at the time when I left, we were still doing 5. So the process is the same regardless of what practice you're going to. You still do the 5 cases. You still do 3 on your first round and 2 on your second round. And people still, at McKinsey especially, we take a tremendous amount of pride and pay a lot of focus into having a very predictable process. And the reason why we do that is, people are already under so much stress going through the interview process. If we can make our process much more predictable and very, very structured and similar across all our candidates, we can be sure that our candidates get the same experience. And no one ever has to feel like they came in on a day where an interviewer had a bad day or they got a bad case. So we vet our cases very stringently to make sure they are all in the same sort of vein. We ask extremely prescribed questions around the cases as well as around the portion of the interview. And we evaluate candidates along the same structured matrix. In fact, at McKinsey, people have to go through a very structured training before they're even allowed to interview. We don't just pick some second or third year person and say, hey, you're free today. Can you interview? You can't interview until you're interview qualified. So we take that very, very seriously. So when I say 95% the same, I do mean that really within the factors we can control, we try to control for an equality, a parity of experience, whether or not you are applying to a practice or to the generalist class.
Yes. And you took part in this hiring process, no?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I probably started interviewing from my third or fourth year there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I didn't even know this. So even better that we're so lucky to have you on the show. But so let me ask you, what are you looking for? What is McKinsey looking for in hires?
So at the risk of being a cop-out, I would do two things. Right? Well, part of it is that the process evolves constantly. So, and as you know, I've been out since 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or I guess not 2016. Just kidding. I left in 2016 in April. So I don't know. A, I don't know if the process evolved, and B, I want to make sure I also repeat a very consistent line that we repeat across all our recruiting events all across the world, which is that our website is actually a tremendous source of information. And I will say this from personal experience. People always think the website is just what you do to tell people you did your research. And that's not the case for McKinsey in particular, I would say. I don't know about the rest. I can't speak to the rest of the firms. But we put a tremendous amount of information on the website. And I would encourage people who are interested to really spend time studying it. There's so many clues in there as to what we look for. But I will tell you, outside of the website, if I could boil it down, I think we are really looking for people who have a strong sense of curiosity. And I know it's easy to say.
Curiosity, huh?
It is really true. It is really true across all the people I've met at McKinsey.
Yeah.
People really care. They don't really accept things at face value. If I told you, did you know in general the weather is better in Chicago? And you would say, really? Is that true? But why? Why would it be better? Why would you be able to say a statement like that? Why does it matter? I mean, these are things that it's a silly example, but the desire and interest in continuing to ask questions is really important. Because imagine the corollary is if you went to a client and the client said, look, I don't intend to investigate any change to my current process. I think, one group of people would say, okay, great, let's move on to the part that you would investigate. And at McKinsey, the first question would be, but why wouldn't you investigate this? What makes you so sure the process is right? What's in the context that makes you think that this should be out of scope for discussion or that there are no further improvement opportunities? So I think that sense of, if you care about these things, I think straight away, consulting is a very natural career for you to think about. I mean, when I think about my summer internship in Singapore, and Darren, one of the guys, we have a mutual friend we worked with, and he'll tell you the same thing. When we went out for lunch, everyone would have their cell phone on the table because there were always so many questions to Google. Someone would say something, someone else challenge it, and straight away you have to Google and answer. And that's the kind of people we are as a group. It's got to be I think that cultural element is really important, both in terms of enjoying the people you work with, enjoying the work you do, and also being successful at your work. Yeah. So I think curiosity is important, and then structure is important. Are you a kind of person who can sit down and think about things in segments? Do you know how to break the problem down? Or are you the kind of person that's very overwhelmed by a big question and says, I don't even know how to start answering that, and don't want to sit down and think about how to start answering that?
Yes.
If that's the kind of, if having questions like that stress you, then, maybe that's not culturally, maybe that's not really then a job for you. And which is not to say you don't learn how to break down a question. You absolutely do as part of, your training at McKinsey or any other consulting firm. But you need to be willing to step up to that challenge. And, some people don't enjoy that. That's okay. And business school, of course, is a proxy too, right, for recruiting, which is why we spend so much time, interviewing at the top business schools. And, while I have the soapbox a little, Darren, I'd also love to say, we don't have the resources to interview, obviously, at every business school, but it doesn't mean that we only hire from the best colleges or the best business schools. And there is a process by which you can network your way in. And I would encourage people to be persistent. Yep. If you had chosen your business school for a certain reason, but, think that you are well matched to the candidates that we normally see, or that indeed you think we'd be missing out if we didn't see you, email someone, get in touch with someone, follow LinkedIn and trace the path and follow the crumbs till you get to someone who can say, I share your context. I get why you picked a school that may not be on our radar, and we'd love to speak with you. Here's how it can happen. But I think, we're always on the hunt for good talent. Unfortunately, because of resources, we have to streamline our efforts a little, but that shouldn't be a discouragement to people.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Wow, I'm learning so much. And so I really am. Yeah. So it's one thing to break into the firm, right? And you've laid out that process and what you're looking for and the challenges. But what about succeeding once you land in that role and, getting promoted and moving on to bigger and bigger responsibilities? Like, in your opinion, after your time at McKinsey, what does it take to rise to the top at the firm?
I would start by saying this maybe and reframing the question, which is, what does it take to be successful in each role that you play at McKinsey? And whether or not you rise to the top is part how good you are, so part capability, part desire, and part luck. And there are a lot of very capable people who are very successful who also choose to leave before partnership because they decided they want to do something else. And I often say this because, we talk about up or out in consulting firms, and that's probably true. We do try to move people on if they have no intention of striving for partnership, or if, it seems like they've been struggling for a long time. It gets demoralizing for them and they might be a better fit somewhere else. So, up or out sounds brutal, but I also like to see it as helping everyone sort of come to their decisions a little quicker. How much do you want this, and how much do you, how good is the fit here? And, is this what you want in life? I think the lifestyle can be challenging for some people, but it is still the best place I've ever worked at, right?
Yeah.
So, apart from the desire and luck, which I think luck is inherent in everybody's job conversation, right? Whether you're in consulting or some other industry, I would say that diligence is not just the end of it. Obviously, you have to work hard, but I do think it is about being open-minded and about constantly challenging yourself. So what do I mean by that? So at McKinsey, the most successful associates are the ones who ask a lot of questions, are willing to take, clear feedback, and they never get very offended by it. They always see feedback as an opportunity to learn more and do more. They are enthusiastic about getting it right. I think one of the most useful things that my seniors ever did for me during my internship in Singapore, I made a PowerPoint page, and for consultants, PowerPoint page is bread and butter. And I put it in the document. And after the meeting, two of my senior colleagues basically circled 40 places where I could have improved this.
You're kidding me. Oh my gosh.
No, I'm not. They circled 40 places. And, it's easy to get offended by that, but it's also way better to just be like, oh my God, thank you for taking the time to do that. And now I learn and I see all the places where a very nitpicky particular person might have said something, but now I know all the basic mistakes not to make. Now I'll be more mindful to check the spelling. Now I'll be more mindful to make sure my page meets a high level for readability and communication and storylining. So, I think that desire and ability to constantly improve is hugely important. the ability to also be communicative is very important. You need to be able to be coherent and clear about what it is you're trying to do and what you're trying to get out of it, and put up your hand if you don't understand or don't know. I think with early associates, especially in your first year in your summer internship, you're going to be told to do something and your response is going to be, shoot, I have no idea how to do this, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to try to figure it out, because that's what good students do. You go figure it out.
Yeah.
But in consulting, you don't have time to figure it out. We work on tight timelines. We want to be very efficient for our clients. And so by all means, try on your own, but learn to cut it off. If you've been struggling for 2-3 hours without getting anywhere, for the love of God, just put up your hand and say, I didn't understand what you wanted me to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it would really solve a lot of problems for your team and for yourself. Don't waste time. Yeah. And I think, in that line, in that spirit of raising the flag early, always understand what the deliverable is. Always be output oriented, always be result oriented. We're not here to kind of answer the world's unanswerable questions. We are here to say, with the information we have, what is the question we're trying to answer, and how can this information help us? And if this information cannot help us, what information will, and how do we get it? So always start with the problem statement. Always remember what you're trying to answer and what you're expected to deliver. And I think if you, and by the way, in life, that works really well too. If you're having a fight with someone, take a breath and be like, I'm sorry, what are we trying to solve here? It really resets a lot of things,
Yeah. No, that's so true. And do you think there's, like, when you were recruiting, and I'm sure you've talked to many friends and friends of friends who want to break into the industry, who wanted to break into the industry, like, do you see any common misconceptions, or at least misconceptions you'd like more applicants to be educated about working in the industry, and about switching into the industry too?
I feel like to be honest, I think consulting as an industry as a whole has done quite a good job kind of putting information out there, and it serves our purpose. It means people are prepared.
Yep.
And it really does fit into our overall narrative. Just, we believe that you don't need a specific background or specific work experience to be in consulting. Anyone with the right interest and skill sets, or basic skill sets, I would say, versus content specific skill sets, could join consulting if they so wish to. I don't think there's a shortcut to the process. I think some people are naturally just extremely structured in their thinking. I mean, those people will put out of scope for our discussion, right? Like, we'll leave those people aside. But for the average person who is interested in this job, I think there's actually a tremendous amount of information out there that makes the career and the industry and the recruiting process extremely transparent. And people should absolutely spend time on that. As far as misconceptions, probably the one thing I would highlight is, I think a lot of us in the job make it sound brutal. I mean, that partly gives us the justification to complain as much as we do, and partly explains why we sometimes are not good friends or not good not so flaky in real life. But I don't think the job really is that crazy. I mean, I did really enjoy my time there. There were times where I hated it for sure, and I had a bad case or a bad client or a bad day. Those happen for sure, that up and down. But on the whole, I look back at my time in McKinsey with tremendous fondness. I made really good friends and learned so much. So I would say this, be prepared to work hard. People are not in the wings waiting to just ding you and kick you out because it's up or out and you didn't do a good job in 3 months. You got to go. It's not like that. People give a tremendous amount of support. Once they're in the family, people really do go all out to make time for you, give you invaluable feedback, help you find a spot and a group of people and a kind of work that works for you. So I would say that don't think that people are highly competitive. Mostly people are just trying to do a good job and get through their day. I don't think people are trying to outperform anybody else. I don't think that it is also, and I think Darren, we talked about this a little bit too before. It's also not the kind of glamour that people may be given to think it is. It is a job like any other. It's not like we're flying in private jets and taking black cars everywhere. I mean, we are the stewards of our clients' resources, and clients often come to us because they want to improve their product, their profitability or deliver better results to their shareholders. And it's quite antithetical to what we're trying to do if we're also then saying, by the way, we're going to have like these really swish lunches and dinners and be living the life of luxury. I mean, people work hard. So it's not to say that we don't take care of you. I mean, you'll be like, for example, at McKinsey, my health benefits were amazing. Like I sent my personal mail to the mailroom. So to the extent that we can, like, we really try to take care of you and really try to make sure you don't have to worry about too many other things so that you can live and get your job done well and without too much conflict in the two. But I don't want people to think that it isn't tough work. It's intense because you're working with really smart people all the time and people with high expectations. People will give you feedback that at some points may feel harsh, but 99% of the time comes from a really good place and comes from wanting to help you be a better version of your professional self. And there's some people who are going to hate it and they're going to say this feedback wasn't fair and I don't buy it. And my response to that is, that's fine too. Don't make this your life, If you think the feedback isn't right and you don't think you're succeeding or you don't think it's a good fit, it's totally okay to walk away, and you should without any regret and without thinking that whatever someone else in the firm thought is a fair reflection of you. I mean, I think at my time at McKinsey, I took the feedback that I liked, ignored the feedback that I couldn't understand, and I got by just fine. Like you gotta do what's right for you in any job. But I do think that people who are open to really learning from others and don't take things personally really thrive. They really do.
Got it. Yeah. And what would you say is like, what was the best part of the job for you and what was the worst part?
The best part for sure, the people.
Your colleagues, you mean, or the people you worked with, or?
Yeah, New York office has 1,000 people. And
my gosh, that's huge.
I know. I met a lot of people there, but I would say that I left McKinsey with like 15, 20 people, maybe 30 people even that I would be super happy to go grab a coffee with. Yeah. And would really enjoy catching up with. Some people, definitely people I would invite to a child's birthday party. I mean, you make that kind of friends who have crossed into the social. And then I think the other great part about the people is it is a community and people are so kind. So I'll give you an example. I just joined Chase. And in my first week of my job, an ex-boss at McKinsey said, I have a really good buddy who's working there. Former McKinsey, you guys never overlap, but he's such a great guy, you should reach out to him. And so I sent him an email and I went to his office, and he's a senior guy at Chase, and he welcomed me into his office, gave me lots of advice, told me to check in every month or two. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know this guy. He probably is so busy, but there's something about, you're in the club, like you're a friend and you're in the tribe and we take care of each other. So I feel, to me, that's always super heartwarming and I feel really, really good about it. The same way I think, Darren, if a Princeton kid writes to you or you write to a Princeton alum and say, hey, I need help. And 90% of the time they're like, happy to do what I can. Wow. That's really nice.
Yeah. What an amazing network to be a part of. And would you say the other consulting firms are similar in that sense? I mean, I know we're not a part of those organizations, but
it's hard to say. But, I've heard a lot of my colleagues at Bain and BCG also say the same things. Yeah. I have, obviously with the larger firms like, Accenture, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, I'm sure they have their own networks as well. I just have a little less contact with them. I will make a small plug for Deloitte though, which is that I interviewed with them and I loved everyone I met. in my first year and my second year, I thought they were a really good crew. And had McKinsey not come through, I probably might have thought about Deloitte as well.
Yeah.
So, I think the people are the best part. And then the worst part, I try to put those behind me. And I always try to contextualize the worst part of the job with it was a specific project, a specific client, a specific deliverable. The worst time I remember was definitely during a project that was overscoped, where the partner probably had promised a little bit more than the team was capable of delivering based on the resources that we had. And the timeline was really bad. We did not have very much time to do it. And so you can just imagine, because of poor communication within the team, we ended up doing a humongous amount of work that just didn't end up being what the client wanted. And that's just an uncomfortable result for the client, the firm, me as the manager, for my team was working very hard. And I remember specifically why I thought it was the worst project that I'd ever done. Quite apart from all those things not going right, it was that one of the guys on my team was ill. And you know what? Like in life, we should just let people go home when they're sick. And he really stepped up, and he really stepped up. He had a very, very bad cold, and he was working the office till really late. And we were, as you know, up against the wall in terms of timeline and had a lot going on. And I look back and I think, why didn't I, as the manager, go to my boss and say, this cannot go on. I need more help. You have to find me somebody else. Why did I say, okay, since you're willing to stay, even though you're sick, you should and can. Like, I look back on that and I feel disappointed by the outcome, because I don't think that was the right kind of value that the firm espouses, and I let it happen. Like, I didn't do my part to step up. So, when I think about the worst parts of the firm, it's sometimes when you make bad decisions, you try to learn from it and try never to do it again. And, above all, I think it's important to remember the job. There's a greater thing out there. We're all trying to do our best, and there's bigger issues and bigger things to life out there. And we shouldn't let it become our whole life. And we shouldn't go beyond what is reasonable. And I think one thing I like about McKinsey is that they really do try to do that. Sometimes, we are a firm of people, and individuals may do better or worse at certain points in their career. But by and large, we really try to stick to that. So,
yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's important in these career series for our audience to hear, not just like the awesome parts of the job, right? But like one specific situation that you mentioned, that could happen, or that I'm sure happens in other firms as well. Being an international student, so, being a Singaporean, did you find it more difficult during the recruiting process, or like, have you seen any trends with that since you joined McKinsey and, started recruiting as well?
So a couple things. I don't think that it was necessarily harder as an international student. That's the bonus part about being in the US, right? And being face to face with a lot of people. What may not be clear to your listeners or people in their first year of business school trying to recruit in consulting is, for a lot of firms, and figure out which firms these are, for a lot of firms, recruiting is done on an office basis. So don't assume that we've thrown your name into a hat and then interviewed everybody in a line, and then sort of through some complicated algorithm of matching, figured out who goes where. It just doesn't work that way. What does work is, if you want it to be in our Vietnam office, or if you want it to be in our London office, or if you want it to be in our San Francisco office, you need to go to the recruiting team from those offices and say, guys, hi, here I am. I'd love to find out more about you. I'd love to let you know of my interest. I'm going to apply. Can you tell me more? And that's good for two reasons. That one, it gives the office a chance to have you on their radar, so they know, like, okay, across this class at this school, how many people have some interest in my office? Like, what's the pool we're looking at? And for you as a candidate, it allows you to understand the people that you potentially might be working with. And isn't it nice, like, to be able to start your career there knowing someone from that office who's the people you networked with during business school. So first, the context, understand that it's by office for a lot of firms. And then second, because it is by office, that really takes down a lot of the barriers to recruiting. I was Singaporean, but I was standing at the career fair at my school. I just went to the office I wanted to talk to. McKinsey usually does a big kickoff night where they have people from every office, around a table with a tag. So you go to the right table, you talk to the right people. And no one ever said to me, "Oh, you're from Singapore? Well, you should go talk to the Singapore office." No one ever said that.
Yeah.
What we do ask, I think, you go where you want to go. The only two things I would add around figuring out which office to interview for is, one, be realistic, and two, be long term. So what does this mean? Realistic in that if you wanted to do, let's say you're interested in oil and gas, then you wanted to go interview in the Charlotte office in North Carolina for the Charlotte office. The Charlotte office doesn't do any oil and gas. Everyone knows that oil and gas is out in Texas. If you told them you were interested in oil and gas but wanted to go to their office, everyone has to figure out a really good story while you're there. And also, what work would you do? If you got to the Charlotte office and then, of course we staff globally, but you also want to be working with the people in your office, right? At some point. Why would you go all the way to Charlotte and then be flying to Texas all the time? It just doesn't make sense. So I would say be realistic about the work that your office does and what your personal interests are. That's one. And then two, be long-term, meaning don't, I guess maybe long-term is not the right way to phrase it, but don't game the system. Don't go to one office I'm Singaporean. So my experience is a bad experience. So I summered in the Singapore office.
Yes.
Okay. Because I wanted to be at the Singapore office after I graduated. And everybody planned around that. I planned on going home to Singapore. The Singapore office planned on having me for the summer and gave me an offer for full time. It was great. But what happened then was that my personal circumstances changed and I decided to stay in New York. But that really confuses the whole process because recruiting is done on an office basis. And now I basically left the Singapore office hanging, which means they had one more spot to fill that they didn't even know they had to fill. And I had to try to squeeze my way into the New York office, which had already filled all the spots. And then now there's someone else.
Yeah.
It's really very difficult to work around that. And quite honestly, I almost didn't join McKinsey because I wanted to be in New York so badly. And eventually it all worked out, but just through a very rare confluence of happy coincidences, right? But, I think it's important not to try to game the system for international students. It's important not to say, I think I have a better shot of getting into, the Thailand office.
Right.
So I'm going to recruit there. And when I get the offer, I'm going to transfer to New York, or transfer to San Francisco or Chicago. Do transfers happen later on? Yeah, they can for any number of reasons. But, our offices do plan the recruiting system around specific office-based needs. So you really make it difficult for yourself and for people when you do it that way, and you put yourself at risk of not getting the offer that you want. If you want to go to San Francisco, just go to San Francisco. There's no limitation. And then, of course, the final thing is in New York or in the US-based offices, there may be some visa-related issues. That's a little bit outside everybody's control. But McKinsey and many, many large firms all retain legal advice around immigration and visa issues.
Yeah, I was going to ask when you were mentioning, how the offices are recruiting, if someone has actually designed a heat map that shows, this New York office has 1,000, employees and, Sao Paulo has X many and Singapore has X many. And, these offices are better for these industries or these functions. Is there something like that out there? Or does that have to just be discovered?
I do think it does. Some of it's pretty obvious and some of it has to be discovered, right? And the reason why it's probably not published is it's not really helpful probably, I assume, to the work if your client is in New York and you publish that New York office does primarily financial services, but your client is in, water management. They'd be like, what the heck? They don't do any water management. I don't want to go there. And by the way, McKinsey is truly global.
Yeah.
Other firms do not necessarily work this way for sure, but McKinsey is truly global. So we have previously flown in, experts from Germany or London to tackle a specific problem in the US when we needed them to. And I've often been on the phone with people. I have been on the phone with someone in Sao Paulo asking about specific issues, and in Norway and in Sweden.
Yeah.
So it's really just, it is really about thinking a little bit about the dynamic, right? From a client perspective, we do want our clients and, our candidates to know we do staff globally when the need exists. And we do, we do tap on experts all across the world. But when you are yourself thinking about a career and, in the early stages, your evaluations and the people you interact most with should be in your office. It'll be hard to really build a community if your body is sort of only there like one day a week or every 2 weeks, and then you are just traveling somewhere else to another office all the time. So that's why I give that counsel around try to find an office that meets your industry interests. Yeah. Then I think during the recruiting process, you should absolutely ask people what their focus is. You would imagine that in San Francisco, there's a lot of tech. Yeah. You would imagine in Chicago, they serve a lot of advanced industries or a lot of consumer industries because that's where they're headquartered. In our New Jersey office, we probably do a lot of pharmaceuticals because that's where pharma companies are. So is this easily discoverable? Yes, if you went to look at, basic U.S. economy and where the hubs are.
Yeah.
And it's also easily discoverable when you go to each individual website for the firm. They may generally speak to some of their broader verticals. And then you can just ask. Yeah. But it starts from somewhere. Which is why, again, it all comes back, right? Don't start the year. If you start the year knowing you want to go into consulting, that's great. You've already done some of the work. Yeah. Then I think the next thing to start thinking about is where do you want to be? Like, where do you want to wake up every weekend? And then what kind of work are you interested in? And that's when you need to start sort of trading off your personal, requirements and your work requirements. And for example, I had a colleague who moved to Boston because his wife was in a PhD program over there. Boston, they do a lot of tech and biotech. And so, he himself usually does financial services, but he was like, if someone will give me a chance at biotech, I'm ready to learn. I'm open to doing biotech work. Stay in Boston, no problem. Then he doesn't travel all that much, travels some, but not all the time, with his wife and family on the weekends. So, you just don't constrain yourself to, but in too many levels, because then, it really becomes very difficult to staff you. If you told the firm, I need to be in Boston because my wife is pregnant, right? Or I need to be here because my husband, has his family is there and he has an aging parent. So I need to be in Boston, but I don't want to do biotech. Then, what the heck is people supposed to try to do? So be flexible about that, I guess is what I would say. And yes, it may not be easily built out, but this information is definitely available.
Got it. And were there any very helpful resources for you when you were recruiting or after you joined that you pointed applicants to McKinsey to? That could be books, websites.
As you know, I always point everyone to our website. You'll find at business school, people pass along two types of material. One set of the materials is books on how to crack the case or breaking the case, or there's lots of books around that. I spent probably very little time on those. I just didn't think it was so helpful for me personally. And I do think that for some of the candidates we've seen, they get a little bit overcoached because they read the book and memorized these structures. They memorize formulas like revenue equals profits minus costs, but not really understanding how to apply that, or the 5 Ps or the 4 Cs, or I don't even know what those are. It's a high pressure interview and you have to be so flexible. Yeah. If you haven't really internalized those things, I wouldn't even bother. So I did not use the books. The other set of materials that I found extremely useful would be what at Kellogg, we had a consulting club, and I know Wharton has one. I'm sure Harvard has one. All these consulting clubs try to collate a set of cases for practice. And I do think that practice makes perfect. People will differ on how many cases you need to do before your actual interview to make perfect. But I would say, I did between 10 and 15 cases, and that was good. Some people did 40, and I don't know if you get a little bit of case fatigue. 40 cases is a lot of cases. And by the way, the interview process is so long. You do 5 cases just for one firm. Imagine I interviewed for 6 firms or 7 firms.
Oh
That's
my
like
gosh.
35 cases. If I had practiced 40, I would have died.
You just can't view the world the same, can you? After you've done 40 cases, like every single thing I would imagine would be like, let me do a case on this.
I also don't know if it matters or helps. There's got to be a point of diminishing marginal returns.
Yeah.
I do think a couple things though to sort of shortcut and make that process pretty efficient. One is, those cases are helpful. The practice cases are helpful because they really give you a sense of what's current and how people are approaching the cases. McKinsey cases in particular are structured a little differently. And so for those, you can refer to the couple on the website. I would save those for the very tail end of your preparation. I would say that interviewing with alumni and people, each of the recruiting teams from the firms will offer some case help. You should totally leverage those. You should recruit with you should talk to alumni and get some help. You should go to your seniors in the school and say, hey, you're at McKinsey. Would you mind doing a case with me? Of course, having been there myself and having done many, many volunteer cases during recruiting season, at some point you have to say no. And so to me, this is just a general plug for be a nice person, be fun and friendly, and be friends with people before you need their help. It really helps.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I will say that if you've never done consulting cases before, please don't make your first practice interviews with people who also are in the same boat. That's like the blind leading the blind, and it's you get a very weird experience of it. Make your early cases with people who are experienced either in the job or in giving cases or at very least have gone through the interview process successfully or not. I think that's good for the beginning part. Then I think in the middle part, start doing cases with friends or buddies, and you'll find plenty of those in first year business school. And you guys can help each other out by asking the questions. And then towards the end, save 1 or 2 really high quality cases for your own practice or have someone give that case to you so that you can get as close to your experience as possible. And if you've only done 10 cases, don't feel that confident, but don't have time to do more, even reading cases is really helpful. And I'll tell you why. It's because it gives you a sense of the little tweaks that you have to make for each industry. So if you're doing, for example, a transportation logistics case, they're asking you about train cars, and you're trying to figure out how many train cars you need to buy to, create the most efficient logistics supply chain for your client. You may forget that trains are not 100% utilized all the time. So you may forget as you're sizing the market, for example, to take a little discount and say, well, let's assume trains are 70% utilized. You would not think to do that if you have not done a train car case before or a logistics case, which involves utilization. So that sort of stuff is helpful when you just read cases. You just pick them up really quickly. You're like, oh, if I were to do hotel occupancy, for a hotel case, I need to do occupancy. If I do train cars, I do utilization. If I do, eyeglasses, I need to think about, regulations, stuff like that.
No, that's such good advice. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure our listeners will too. We've spoken for nearly an hour. I just want to leave you with the soapbox one more time. If you had any last advice to applicants considering consulting.
No, I mean, I talked for an hour, but you know what? It's a job. It's a job. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I loved it. I would recommend it to anybody. It's great training. It's a completely achievable recruiting process. Talk to people, be humble, be open to listening to feedback, and you'll go very far in life, probably.
Yeah. Gosh, Sandra, thank you so much. This has been
No
our first
problem.
career series interview, and I'm just super pumped about this, and I can't wait to publish this one. So thank you so much.
Of course, so happy to help.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.